We are live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the welcome to meeting number 7 of the Tree Advisory Board and Ad Hoc Committee. Today our goal is to finish our consensus motions on our report for all the things we've been working on here for the trees. We'll start off with Lisa, if you would mind taking attendance.
Sure. So I will share my screen and I would start with Alan Billingsley.
I'm here.
Present. John Boatman.
I'm here too.
Present. Ed Brooks is excused. Tico Mir Dunlop. Tico Mir, are you muted?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay, great. Thank you. I can't see everyone when I share my screen. Thank you. Jean Ellers.
John Ellers is present.
Yes, it looks like she's muted as well. Jesse Gamble.
Here.
Do we have Jesse Gamble?
Not see.
Okay. Micah Glassstetter.
Here.
Thank you. Melissa Jackson.
Here.
Thank you. Hank Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Maya Neff.
Here.
Denise Nicole Franklin.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay. I think the first thing on our agenda then, just as a point of information, we will not be voting on minutes as we are still working on the minutes from last week. So the first thing we will start with is a discussion of the interviews and the survey highlights from Jonathan and Lisa.
And Jonathan is ill this evening, so it's myself and Hayden Campbell from Burke Consulting. So I'll just skim through the notes from the stakeholder interviews. We interviewed 6 entities, cultural centers or affordable housing or utility and infrastructure type folks. They were sent an email. The public participation plan had a long list of folks that had an interest in trees or could potentially have an interest in trees. And so an email was sent to them, including the survey link and with a suggestion that if they wanted to have an interview, they could. That was so that we could try to reach out to folks that may not necessarily be on the committee that have something to share on trees. So I'll just breeze through the themes, and then I see that Tico Mir Dunlop has his hand up. We'll come back to you in a moment. These were interviews that Jonathan conducted in early to mid-April. And so these are just summaries of the key points. So there was discussion about street trees and public rights of way, and ensuring there was the right tree in the right place over the long term, so that if trees are planted, that they would minimize damage to the utilities or sidewalks and be easier to maintain. There were comments about maintenance and how best to maintain trees to be healthy and safe. And also, again, right tree, right place when species are planted to allow for maintenance. There was a mix of opinions on what should happen with individual properties regarding trees that could be removed. Some felt that was a private property issue. Others thought just provide education to property owners so they can learn about tree maintenance. And some suggestions on how some folks felt about the tree retention standards in residential areas, that they were striving to retain trees wherever possible, but that there should be some flexibility. Others thought commercial development seemed to have the most impact on tree canopy. Something that may be appropriate for this evening is when you get to the incentives, is there was discussion on which incentives might be helpful to ensure that trees are retained or planted. So a few different ideas for either homeowners as well as for development. Ensuring permit fees are low to attain compliance, allowing fee in lieu. Some saying which of the incentives might be most helpful. Some points on equity, that it was important, and some ideas on how to help make that happen. Where to plant in areas that have less trees. A focus on education, on the benefits of trees. And then there was a question asked for adding or restoring tree canopy, some potential locations. So this is meant as background. There's also the survey results that we provided in your April 12th meeting. Since that time, there's only been a handful of additional surveys. When we last gave you the summary, there were 102 surveys, and then I think it's been up to about 108 with similar results as shared before. And then we've previously provided a summary of the tree talk. So we just wanted to bring you up to speed with those targeted interviews. Tikamir, you have your hand up?
I just was wondering, how were the stakeholder organizations chosen? Because it doesn't really seem like there are any specifically like environmental groups.
There were a wide range of groups that were listed in the public participation plan, including environmental groups, tribes, all different kinds of agencies. And I don't remember the exact number, Courtney, but I would say what were there, about 60 email addresses or so.
55, and I can try to pull up that list. It was approved by the city council, the initial list. All of those folks were contacted to make application for this committee, participate in the tree talk, as well as participate in the targeted surveys. And so it really just became dependent on who was back in contact with us and chose to participate.
I do have that ready if you want me to share that. So this is an attachment to the public participation plan that the city council looked at in November and was part of their approval of the scope for the effort. And so it really was a range of governments, special interest. You can see some special interests with environmental backgrounds, advisory boards. See if I can get the whole page to show up here. Education, neighborhood associations, business, community groups. So you'll see a wide range of entities, including things like the Watershed Council, the Tahoma Audubon Society, etc. So a wide range of groups. So we were offering to all of these folks to have a one-on-one with a focus on, especially those that weren't necessarily on the committee.
I'm getting my things together. This is Jean. I've stopped, and because I had some comments, but actually questions.
Are they, Jean, are the questions on the committee report, or are they on the engagement, the interview results?
Well, it was about, I was curious about, basically it was on what the lady just got to talking about. If I could turn to it, I did kind of write something in. Go ahead. I've got to. Would you mind repeating the last entity of your discussion? Because I have a ton of mixed up comments here.
Sure, we were going through the public participation plan list of stakeholders and trying to respond to Tika Merritt Dunlap's question about who was contacted. And so we were just sharing that list from the city council packet last November. And I was pointing out a few names that have an environmental focus. So
Sure.
on, yeah, on special interest groups, there were the Sound Oaks Initiative, the Tahoma Audubon Society. And then there was also under community groups, the Chambers, Clover Creek Watershed Council.
I just would like to say that I'm a part of the Lakewood Garry Oak Conservancy. Well, we're called the Lakewood Garry Oak Coalition now, and we weren't contacted. So
we had several email addresses, I believe, Courtney, from each group. So I think they were.
I think that there may have also been some conversation about doing targeted interviews with represented bodies that weren't on the committee or had participated in other formats.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I was curious about that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Based upon what I read under the stakeholders interview, and I think that's where you were, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious about why there were so few too, considering the breadth of what we're trying to do. I just thought there would be more, and
gave the opportunity to a long list, and these were the folks that indicated an interest. We also provided the link to the survey so they could share also with their constituents.
that's great.
Yeah.
And how are we defining the stakeholders in this particular situation? Who are we really considering as stakeholders?
Well, I think the city had been maintaining a list of folks that had shown an interest in either planning level issues in the city or in trees specifically. And so that's where this list came from. So it reflected nonprofits and service providers and other interest groups.
Okay. I just thought it was important to have more, but if that's all that responded, that's all that responded. We really can't say much about that other than thank you. I guess I'm concerned too about the notion that the city would need to, on number 4, how can tree protection be? If I'm off key, just tell me and I will stop. Because as I said, I have strange notes here that I did in the dark almost. How can tree protection be balanced with city responsibilities to provide for affordable housing and job opportunities? We haven't talked about that yet, have we?
It did come up at past meetings, I think, in introducing some of the key issues in March and April.
For me, yeah, okay. I'm thinking that's way out of whack. The city is not into housing people. That's a different should be another organization. I wouldn't want to put that on the city's back. To me, that's not an appropriate concern for the city of Lakewood or any city. That they are different pieces that they would be concerned about. But when you're looking at protection for trees and then including that into affordable housing and job opportunities, it seems to be not about what we were really officially talking about. I thought that was my thinking.
If I might, I think the way it is, and it is related to the city, is the city has to plan under the Growth Management Act to meet its housing and job targets, which means providing the opportunities for housing and jobs. It also needs to protect critical areas. There's a lot of things under the state law that the city needs to do. And I think that was what that question was about was there's a lot of things that the city has to demonstrate it's doing, even if it's not building the housing, it has to show that its development regulations meet a lot of the state goals. So that's what that was referring to, not that the city's going to build the housing itself.
Well, and then on number 6, what are some ideas for helping property owners with tree health and safety education and maintenance? I don't think the city is in that business. Private property, if that's what we're talking about, the people need to be responsible for their own property. That seems to be out of whack to me, in my thinking. That's not the city's job to go to individual homeowners and talk about anything or enforcing anything, unless of course there's something that is written up as a piece to be enforced and it's not being, but there should be another entity that would be responsible. I guess I was just wondering about the 7 of them, and of the 7, there were 2 that I really was concerned about in terms of the city's goals, the city's responsibilities. And with all of that, if we're going to do that, the trees and how they're impacting our health, that the benefits, that should be a part of what someone should have been talking about in their responses as well. So my thinking is that we were talking about, we know the benefits of the trees, but we haven't really talked about much about what happens to us, our environment, our atmosphere, with the absence of those trees that are taking care of cleaning the air and all of that for us and keeping us from eroding into nothingness. That maybe that should fall under simply the benefits of the education, but it certainly ought to be somehow noted. Someone should have been talking about it. I'm thinking about the people who were interviewed. I would have thought someone would have had those thoughts in mind.
Well,
And
you can see in their responses, they did talk about the benefits of trees. And I think the idea of sharing information about health, safety, maintenance, et cetera, was to help retain the tree canopy so it can provide those environmental benefits.
That's all I'll say about that for now. Thank you.
Sure. Melissa, did you have something? Melissa, your hand is raised. I didn't know if you had something.
Yes, I just would just like to add that I'm hoping that by some device we can reapproach some of these organizations before before Lakewood votes, before the council votes on these issues. And if there's some means that needs to take place for us to vet these folks, make sure that we're reaching out, we have the right phone numbers, the right emails. I don't know if members of the committee can help with that, but I'm hoping we can try again with some of these organizations before it's all said and done.
Sure.
And are there any other comments about that, or are we ready to move on to code evaluations?
Well,
We do have 7 other code evaluations to try and accomplish tonight.
Yeah. Okay, well then I think it's probably time then, Lisa, for us to move on to those.
yes.
So I think, Chair, I was going to just remind folks who may or may not have been at all of the recent meetings where we're at, so that we can focus on those last 7. So we finished 6 items: the tree canopy goal, the residential lot exemption, industrially zoned properties, the significant tree definition, particularly related to Gary Oaks, and the heritage and historical trees. So what we have left to do is to come back and talk about the exemptions related to easements and rights of way, the tree permit process, maximum tree removal on single family properties, replacement, the tree fund, and fines and incentives. So if you'd like, I can pull up the packet. We can talk about easements and rights of way. That's where we left a gap.
That would be great.
What,
So
what page?
we're now in the packet for the meeting. We're on page 5 of the committee's report, which is page 11 of the PDF. If you counted from 1 to the place we're on page 11. If you look down in the bottom right, you should be around, it should say page 5, and we should be looking at, we're sort of at the top of page 5, where we're looking at options related to utility exemptions and rights of way. And there should be a bunch of red lines where we were trying to work through the issues last time.
Got it.
Okay. So what we were talking about last time were options to retain the exemption that that the utility companies and within street rights of way, there's an exemption from needing a permit. There is a requirement to have notification. The other option we looked at was removing the exemption so that utility and rights of way would meet similar standards, whether it was private or public, and private means commercial or residential, just it's anything that's privately held, but provide for a simple permit process. We also talked about that it's really important to redefine trimming and pruning in the code. And there was discussion about us bringing back some options that reflected the discussion. And so because we had to get the packet out yesterday really quickly after your Tuesday meeting, we didn't try to redefine them at that point, but I've got in this green box on the screen some ideas so that all of the options, whether you're retaining the exemption with notification or you're removing it and requiring a permit, in either case, there would be a redefinition of trimming and pruning so that it improves code interpretation and enforcement. That option 1, retaining the exemption with notification and redefining trimming and pruning, would address all tree types. Option 2 is rewritten to say you could remove the exemption for utilities and rights of way, and they would meet similar standards as private or public parcels, but there would be a simple permit, and that will be defined when we get to key issue number 5. So we haven't defined what the permit process looks like yet. Similar to option 1, we would redefine trimming and pruning. We'd address all tree types, but ensure Gary Oaks have appropriate standards like Oak Harbor. So that's a difference. And we would ensure appropriate arborist certifications for private or public entities considering expertise and equity. So that was an attempt to try to bring together a lot of different discussion points from last time. Chair, you have your hand up.
Yes, it seems to me that option number 2 encompasses all the discussion that we had in our last meeting, both for the Gary Oaks, for trimming, pruning, and removal of trees, keeping similar standards on private and public lands. I'm going to move that we select number 2 as our option for this key issue.
I'll second that.
It has been moved by Chair Jackson and seconded by Mr. Billingsley that we move forward with option number 2 on key issue number 4. I'll turn it back to you, Chair, for discussion.
Is there additional discussion that you would like to have concerning this?
Mr. Glassstetter has raised his hand.
Okay.
Oh, I think he may have had connection issues. Just a moment.
It was the same thing. I switched from my phone to my iPad. And so this is on the issue of public utilities and rights of way.
Yes.
I guess my feedback on that is that entity doesn't exist that you're looking for. There isn't a certified arborist qualified to work around power lines. And the other issue is there are best practices when it comes to pruning a tree, but it's pretty hard to maintain a 3-foot clearance from a straight line and trim a tree the way it should be trimmed. I mean, pretty much, I think that this is going to run into a huge roadblock because this is a nationwide industry standard that they just trim trees 3 feet away or 4 feet away or 10 feet away from these power lines. And I just don't know if this is going to go anywhere. Other than if they're considering the route of a new power line, and I can see that being relevant. But as far as their maintenance and trimming, I don't think there's any wiggle room there.
Are there additional comments?
Mr. Billingsley has his hand up.
Yeah, just one real quick one. He's absolutely right about power lines, and the city's just going to take this as a recommendation anyway, but it does also pertain to cable TV and telephone lines, which I know do not have a 3-foot separation between trees. They run right through a number of trees right in front of my property, literally through them. So perhaps there is some middle ground where it will do some good.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ellers has her hand raised.
It appears that I am appreciating both comments. My concern is somehow there needs to be some encouragement for the people responsible for putting down their wires and all that to start going underground with them. Otherwise, we need a different set of guidelines for trees that were there first and then they're being, abused. That's how I look at it. I'm sorry, my words could be different, but that's kind of how I feel. Trees are there and then you go and put in something that's going to, they're going to grow. So I think that, I don't know, maybe A, B, or C, something needs to be added to ensure the thoughtfulness on how to move forward. There needs to be another consideration. It's okay to put things in tubes in the ground, especially when we are valuing the territory where trees are. Thank you.
Mr. Dunlop has his hand raised.
I'd just like to agree with what Jean said regarding power lines being underground. Like when I was little, I lived in Europe and all the power lines are underground, and it seemed like a much better system. And also, besides trees, obviously, it might be expensive to set them up underground, but when we have storms here, transformers explode and all that. So I think there are advantages to having them underground besides just trees. And then obviously there are the tree benefits too. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's true.
Mr. Glastetter has his hand raised, and then Chair Jackson.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but most developments that go in have underground utilities. It's extremely rare that, someone's going to put in a permit application and want to fly wires through the air. That's pretty antiquated. And I just don't think that's a real risk, other than super high voltage lines that are transporting power from one area or district to another. But every single new development that you see, everything's underground.
Jackson?
Okay, I just am thinking at this point, some of the power line concern might be a little bit out of the purview of this question. I think we're kind of focusing on the lines that already exist and the trees that already exist, and then we can possibly work with that in a different area. But as it stands now, are we ready to take a vote on option number 2 as a working idea for us to move forward. We've first and seconded it, so I think it's time to take a vote, Lisa.
And so this would be for option 2 as revised. Ellen Billingsley, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Boatman,
Yay.
and is excused. Tico Mir Dunlap,
Yay.
Jean Ellers,
Yay.
Micah Glastetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Hank Jones,
Yay.
Sean Martin is excused. Maya Neff,
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Yay.
thank you. Denise Nicole Franklin,
Yay.
thank you. Chair, I can continue on to the next item.
That'd be great.
Okay, I'm going to move our box so it's out of the way of our next topic here. Okay, so this is about the tree permit process. And we're into section 18A 7320A, referring to tree requirements being reviewed in association with land use permits. So right now, there's not a separate tree permit. It is, the review is done in conjunction with another land use permit. It's difficult to track tree removal because they are exempt, except as you've recommended, the residential exemption and the industrial exemption, and now the utility exemption. There would be some kind of review. So some cities will offer 2 levels of permits, like tree permits, or forms demonstrating compliance, like affidavits. We talked a little bit last time about self-certification, or they require some kind of notification or tree removal request form. So there's sort of, you could take it as there's a more in-depth review, and then there's sort of a more streamlined review, provided conditions are met. So we provided some examples. The costs for tree permits are relatively low to other types of land use permits, but we've discussed in the past that where you set the tree permit fee could be a disincentive to seeking a permit or a cost burden. Courtney, did you want to add something here?
Yeah, I just think it's a Scrivener's error neither of us caught. We do have a tree removal permit project for non-exempt activities currently. I just wanted to clarify that. So tree removal permits do exist. This is covering now all of those items that we just removed from the exemption list. We do not have any permitting process for. We're establishing a new tree permit process for what have been exempt, just to provide clarification.
Thank you, Courtney. I've stricken the word "not" here. So the options, and we've identified here, are to review the non-exempt activities in association with land use permits, and charging a fee for that, or having no fee or sliding scale, reviewing activities with a tree permit regardless of whether there's a land use permit or not, and then tracking exempt activities through self-certification, notification, or other simple process. So Courtney, maybe we could kind of reword these a little bit based on what we were just discussing. I think what we wanted was a simple permit for formerly exempt activities, right? So I think if we just add track formerly exempt, that might help there. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree.
And then I think maybe then we only have, we can get rid of option 1 here.
Yep, there's 2 options.
Right.
Does everything get reviewed the same, or do we have a gradual process depending on the type of removal?
Right. Exactly. So hopefully that makes sense. We have option 2 is reviewing permits for compliance regardless of whether there's a development activity or not. And then we have the tracking formerly exempt activities through some kind of simpler process. And then you can choose if you want to have a fee or no fee or a sliding scale. It looks like there's questions from Melissa and then John. Melissa, you're muted.
I would recommend item number 2 to the group, possibly with an addition of financial aid when there is some sort of financial difficulty, and possibly a cost of about $150 per permit. I'm just going to throw that out to start discussion, but also, so $150 or a reduced fee or no fee based on a income scale or a sliding scale. And possibly even the funding could be used from the tree fund for those folks that need financial aid.
I will say regarding discussion of tree fund allocations that because all of that goes into the general fund, it will be at the will of the city council. So that is subject to change depending. This committee won't have any input really on how any dollars are spent.
Jean Ellers?
First question, I'm curious about why are we continuing to be concerned about people with their private property being able to afford to take care of their needs? If there is a need, we're talking about $100, $150. That's not a great deal of dollars, and certainly maybe there's something that can be worked out, but I'm concerned that we're always offering up dollars to do things when it's for people's own best interest on their own personal property. So I guess I have a little concern with that. I wish we would find maybe another way of putting it, because to me, that's just a little bit too much of we need to help each other. But I just believe people with their own property and so forth, seems to me like they ought to be able to take care of the need when it comes down to ensuring proper maintenance and safety of their property without someone giving them the money to do so. $100, that was a nice little amount of money, but that's a concern for me for there. And lastly, I would really like not to see a self-certified situation. It just rings true for me that it's always something that it helps people to not be honest and honorable with what they're doing. A simple tab that can be torn off at the end of for example, a simple tab that could be torn off at the end of their permit or something like that, once they're out there doing whatever they need to do, and when they've completed what they've done, and on that tab, it could be indicated, for example, that yes, this and this has been done. Just call that a self-cert, but at least we have something on file that said they did it. And in the event something turns up that you need to go to assess what has gone on, if it has not been done, then that's a different issue, but at least it's an issue. And then that means we don't have a bunch of people just lying to themselves, although you can do the same thing with the tab, but it's a little different. End of my comment. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Dunlop, followed by Billingsley, followed by Franklin, followed by Glassstetter.
I just would first like to agree with Jean. I don't think we should have self-certification. Just seems like a bad idea. And also regarding the fees, I think these should probably be per tree, not just per. Yeah, I think they should be per tree, just not in general if for multiple trees at once. So yeah. Oh, and also one other thing I wanted to mention is before you mentioned simple permit. What is a simple permit?
If I could, so two things. First, with the per tree or general fee, this is another idea where I think we tried to say it with the sliding scale. Based off of tree species, you may want to charge more. I don't know. That would be a place that we could put that type of an idea here. Also for a simple permit, so everything that we're talking about right now is going to require resources, staff resources. So if we're going from exempting, I think it was it 65 or 85% of our current tree canopy that is currently exempt to now requiring some type of permit for every tree removal in the city, that is going to take significant staff resources. And so that's how the city council, when we present these recommendations, is going to be looking at it. So right now for our tree removal permit, we require a survey of every tree, included and typically by an arborist without having some type of mitigation or removal allocation via the exemption process, which this group is wanting to move away from. So with a simple process, the idea was that they would be able to maybe forego the entire survey activity, decrease the review process, but we would still have record of the tree removal. And that is, I won't say beneficial, but right now with our existing staffing, more manageable. Or the committee is asking for the council or recommending that the council hire significantly more staff in order to be able to manage tree removal permits. Did that answer your question, Mr. Dunlop?
I think so.
Mr. Billingsley, I think you were next.
Two very short comments. If you want compliance with people, keep it simple and keep it cheap. And I want to reiterate what Courtney said. It's a huge amount of resources we're looking at city to go in and look at every tree removed on a tiny little lot. We want compliance, we want to review it, but we don't want to make a detailed sketch of a 2,000 square foot lot who guy needs to remove a Douglas fir tree. Let's keep it realistic.
Ms. Franklin?
Thank you. I just wanted to just touch on the reason why I think it's important to have that sliding scale or making everything affordable for everyone. Just for the comment of, you know, it's a simple $100. We're coming off of a global pandemic. People may not have family members. I'm thinking about our community. The city of Lakewood on the website, I'm just going to read this verbatim. It says the city of Lakewood enhances local quality of life by providing essential service in a fiscal responsible manner, ensuring public safety, promoting economic development, and preserving our natural environment. So in thinking about the goals in the strategic plan, why wouldn't we build an equitable services and a sliding scale to everybody in our community? It just makes sense that we would have something that can touch everybody, that can impact everybody and help everybody. So just want to elevate that in the space. Thank you.
Mr. Glassstetter?
I was going to point out that I don't know of a single licensed bonded tree service that has a minimum charge of less than 400, and that's just to stop the truck and get out and do any service. Most people, in my experience, that are wanting to hire a service to prune or remove a tree, they have the funds to do so. Even people who have saved their money to get this project done or have borrowed money, whatever it is. I'm going to go with agreeing with Billingsley's comment. If it's cheap and simple, more people will be on board for compliance. Sliding scale is great, but if the permit's only $150, I don't see that being a net benefit to say, hey, well, if you have a need, we're gonna drop it to $20. In the end, if you can't afford the permit, you're probably not going to be able to afford the service. That's just my input.
Based on the comments so far, I wonder if a fourth option that would kind of remove some of the complexity around these options would be keep permits cheap and simple, regardless of whether it was formerly exempt or not. That might be a way to have a recommendation to the council without getting into great details.
I may add just to that, with the exception of Gary Oak tree removals, which require the review and monitoring of a certified arborist. And then similar to our existing tree removal permit process. Chair Jackson, you have your hand raised.
Did you say Jean? No,
No, I said Chair Jackson.
sorry.
So we've had some great feedback about making sure we keep in a sliding scale, making sure that the permit process is easy. I think maybe where we might be a little stuck is how much is fair. And so I'm looking for additional suggestions. Is $150 fair? And then if folks need financial aid, they could seek it. Does that sound like a fair option? I think a lot of us are saying that self-certification is probably not the way to go. So if we look at number 4 as an option, the biggest thing we need to come to consensus on is that dollar amount.
Mr. Billingsley?
We can just send the council a recommendation that we would like it to be as inexpensive as I think it's reasonable. We don't have to set a dollar amount either. This is a recommendation to council based on the committee as a whole.
Jean?
And I agree with, Billingsley, I guess that's who it was that just made that comment. I agree with that comment. And I'm thinking that we want to remain comfortable with coming up with our thoughts and being able to say what we're thinking so that we can maybe get the job done in the best possible way. So we all have our opinions on what we see. And I just think it's nice for us to be able to say it and let's leave it as this is what this person thinks. So let's remain open on that. And I don't believe that, again, we're talking about a tree or a couple of trees. And I just think that it's not something that you're going to deal with until the timing is right for you. Unless you've got a real unsafe situation going. Thank you.
Mr. Dunlop?
I just was wondering, so like here it says that keep permits fair, inexpensive, and simple. By simple, does that mean that like all permits would be, or all applications for permits would be accepted? So like in what situations would they be denied? Because if all permits or virtually all applications for permits are accepted, I don't really see the point in even having permits. So what would be the process for denying them?
I think you're a little ahead of us. I believe that we talk about that more in some of the later key issues, but just based off of key issue number 6, that would create parameters for us to specifically for Gary Oak trees deny permits by shifting it over to the critical area ordinance. So this is for those that would be eligible, but certainly, through this process and through others, there will be a much clearer outline for denial when the new code is drafted. I think, Tigomir, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Melissa, I believe you, Chair Jackson, I believe you're next.
Yes, so based on what folks are saying and kind of to keep it maybe a little more general, I move that we adopt item number 4, keep the permits fair, inexpensive, and simple, except for, and I'm sorry, I have to move my screen around, except for the Gary Oaks, can't read the rest, require and review and monitor with an arborist. And then also we will then let the city decide what inexpensive looks like. Therefore, we will remove the $150 per tree and remove the sliding scale caveat. So number 4, as written there in the green box, I move that we approve that.
Mr. Dunlop, you still have your hand raised. All hands are down, Chair Jackson. Mr. Glassstetter, followed by Ms. Neff.
I would like to second that motion.
It's been moved by Chair Jackson and seconded by Mr. Glassstetter that we move forward with option 4 for key issue 5.
Are there any additional comments that folks would like to make before we move to a vote? Okay, if there's no hands raised, Lisa, we can move to the vote.
Alan Billingsley, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Boatman,
Yay.
Tika Mayor Dunlap,
Yay.
John Ellers, John Ellers. I think I saw you say yay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Micah Glassstetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Hank Jones,
Yay.
Maya Neff,
Yay.
Denise Nicole Franklin.
Yay.
All right, Chair, we can move on to key issue 7. No, key issue 8, because we did 6 and 7 last time.
Okay.
We did 6 already?
The
Good.
heritage, yes, the Gary Oaks and the heritage tree.
Is it ever possible? We did, but I had this question about wetlands. When I read that, suddenly it kicked into my mind that, oh my goodness, this is kind of just like the wetland situation, people with their property. And if there was a drop of water, all of your dreams about building whatever had to come to a halt. My question, if I may, is this similar, the results of what we're about to do, is it similar to what would happen with the wetland as what happened? It's
Yes.
like this situation.
Yes, so it would go into the critical areas ordinance, similar to wetlands. So for oak trees over, I can't recall, was it 15 inches?
Yep.
Would be kicked into the critical areas ordinance. 4 to 15 inches or 14 inches, 4 to 14 inches would still be considered significant and require permitting, but not kicked into critical areas.
So hence,
And if any was removed, it would be a 3-to-1 replacement ratio, which is different than the standard 2-to-1.
okay, and so what does that mean for a potential homeowner or industry wanting to build near that? Does that mean no?
No, well, possibly, it would be a reasonable use exception, which would require a public hearing. And then ultimately, it would be up to the hearing examiner to make that final call.
And we have finalized our thoughts on that.
I believe there was a strong majority on that item, yes.
Okay, boy, thank you very much.
Okay, key issue number 8 is about the maximum tree removal on developed single-family properties. So right now, the city allows for a certain number of trees to be removed on a single-family property per year, and then a cap over 5 years. There's jurisdictions that have similar types of regulations, some with more or less trees removed on an annual or multi-year basis. And certainly anything within a critical area, this does not apply. This is really meant for non-critical areas where a homeowner may want to remove, let's say, a tree fruit, an older tree. The options before the committee in the report were to continue with allowing a specific maximum number of trees to be removed per year per property. As we know from the vote you just took, the all trees would have to have some kind of permit or simple permit. But this would be sort of setting up an allowance for a certain number per year. So the idea would be up to 30,000 square feet, 2 per year, max 4 over 5 years, and then over 30,000 square feet, 4 per year, up to 8 max in 5 years. No significant trees may be removed in a critical area or buffer, or if it's a heritage tree. That would be the one difference from your current regulations is we've now incorporated the heritage tree idea that you voted affirmatively for. There would be a permit. The second option is rather than specify a certain number per year or over 5 years, that the property owner must provide justification for removal of any significant tree. No significant trees may be removed in critical areas or buffers, or if it's a heritage tree, and a permit would be required. And the third option would be to say you can remove some trees, but you have to retain a minimum number or percentage of trees per property. No significant trees can be removed in buffers, or if it's a heritage tree, in a permit. So different ways to get at it, specifying a certain number, not specifying a certain number, but requiring a justification for removing any significant trees with restrictions on if they're a heritage tree or critical area buffers. And then another option, which is ensuring that they have a percentage of trees retained per property, provided they are not heritage trees or in a buffer. So different ways to get at this issue. Courtney, did you want to share something, clarify?
Yes, I just wanted to add that for this, you have at the top option for non-Gary oak trees. And so we've kind of distinguished the two separate. We already reviewed the Gary oaks up above for how we would regulate those. And then for non-Gary oaks, this would apply. And then just for my 2 cents, I do think that when you start to put language in that's found in option number 2 for justification, it does become a little harder to administer. And so maybe just making a note of that versus a percentage or something that's data driven. Chair Jackson.
It might be a good point to quickly review what a significant non-Gary oak tree is by definition, so everyone understands.
That's 9 inches diameter breast height.
Okay. Are there any comments on these thoughts?
Okay.
Mr. Dunlop, followed by Mr. Billingsley.
I was thinking the criteria for significant tree, should that be lowered to 6 inches or something similar?
Mr. Billingsley.
We're talking about non-Gary oaks here, so I personally like option number 1 because it slows down systematic removal of all trees on most of our private properties.
Mr. Glassstetter.
I like to explore option number 3, mainly because if you have a certain number of trees over X number of years, well, if you've only got 4 trees, then they can all be gone. And I see a lot of that where people have just clear cut their property, and, you know, maybe it's because they don't like trees, or they feel like they're dangerous, or they don't want to rake leaves or whatever. But it would be nice if there was a percentage required, and maybe that calculation is based on, you know, the ideal canopy size of each species. But if we're shooting for a 40% tree canopy coverage, I think option 3 would be a good idea to consider, that they should have a percentage of tree canopy no matter what their lot size is, that helps ensure that canopy goal that we're shooting for.
Ms. Neff, followed by Mr. Dunlop.
Yeah, I like 3 partly because I like the idea of the percentage of tree canopy versus number of trees, but also it removes the how, knowing how large a lot is before you get to it to figure out whether or not where you fit on the 2 per year, 4 per year kind of thing, because it does get a little bit confusing. Whereas if you keep it with percentages, then no matter what the lot size, it's percentages, it's relatively same no matter what scaled up or scaled down.
Mr. Dunlop, followed by Ms. Ellers.
I just wanted to say with I agree with what was just said about number 3, but I wanted to just mention that it doesn't specifically say percentage of canopy. So like in the first sentence, maintain a specific minimum number of number or percentage of trees per property. It kind of doesn't explicitly say that, so maybe it should be edited to specifically say percentage of tree canopy.
Ms. Ellers.
I'm concerned about private property, personal ownership, and anyone walking onto the property saying what you really can't do. I'm sure that the way we're thinking about the percentages of tree canopy, et cetera, for our city and for where we live at this point, I know it means we mean well, and for all of us, but I'm concerned about what more are we going to do to the homeowner? And since it appears that there is no way around this, we're going to have to find just the right way of handling this, because people's personal rights, when you buy your property, you're thinking you could do what you well please, as long as you're not bringing an unsafe situation or hurting someone else. It's your property. And I'm very concerned about walking up and saying what you can't do. Thank you.
Mr. Dunlop, did you have another comment? Your hand is still raised. Chair, I see no other hands.
Okay, are there any other comments? Just in doing a quick summary of the feedback we've received so far, we've had 3 folks interested in number 3. We've had 1 person interested in number 1, and 1 person voicing concerns over number 2 and 3 concerning personal property. At this point, does anyone feel comfortable making a motion in any way or another?
Mr. Glassstetter?
I feel comfortable moving for number 3 as a recommendation to the city council.
I'll second that because I'm still comfortable with 3 also.
All right, it has been moved by Mr. Glassstetter and seconded by Mr. Billingsley that for key issue number 8, we move forward with option 3.
Okay, are there any other comments before we move to a vote?
Is that as it's been edited on the screen? To focus on percentage and tree canopy?
Yes, that's what I was making the motion for.
Okay.
Great, are there any other comments? Okay, I think we're ready to move to a vote, Lisa.
All right, Alan Billingsley, yea or nay?
Yay?
Okay. John Boatman,
Yay.
Ticomere Dunlop,
Yay.
Jean Ellers,
Abstain.
Micah Glassstetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Hank Jones,
Yay.
Maya Neff,
Yay.
Denise Nicole Franklin.
Yay.
So Chair, if you're ready, we can go into key issue number 9 on replacement.
It's good.
Okay. So we provided some information about tree replacement ratios, recommendations from ISA guidelines, and from other example communities. And basically the idea that mitigation ratios, however set, should be designed to ensure at least one successful new tree for each tree removed with a replacement species that has a similar mature canopy. Currently, Lakewood requires a ratio of 2:1 for significant trees. And for any other existing healthy trees that are not significant, to be replaced at a 1:1 ratio. Currently, there's no difference in replacement ratios for Gary oaks versus other tree types. As was noted earlier, when you voted on Gary oaks, the replacement ratio was increased to 3:1. So the options that were developed in discussions with staff and Planet Geo were mitigation for tree removal should be based on inches removed. Caliper and number of trees required to be planted is based on number of size and trees removed, based on best management practices and by tree type. So for example, native trees and species need. Or option 2 is mitigation should be based on no net loss. Caliper and number of trees required to be planted is based on canopy percent lost and or ecosystem benefit lost. A certified arborist report must determine no net loss conditions and mitigation to ensure this approach can be clearly regulated. It looks like there's a question from Micah Glastetter.
Yeah, it seems, and maybe it's just I'm confused by the wording. In one mitigation option, and I'm not talking about 1 and 2, it says, it's up in the upper paragraphs, but anyway, it says at least one successful new tree for each tree removed with replacement species that has a similar mature canopy spread and maintaining the canopy in perpetuity. Now, I've had so many people ask me this question I've never been able to answer when it comes to this 2:1 ratio. Is that caliper ratio? Like if you remove a 48-inch tree, are you supposed to come up with, let's see, that would be 96 inches in caliper to replace it? I mean, do you have to plant a forest if you remove one big tree?
Right now, yes, it's a 2:1 replacement ratio, which for your example would be 96 total inches. And then we divide that by 3, which is the minimum size, or should be the minimum size for replacement, but with the way that nurseries are, sometimes it ends up being a little smaller. And so you'd be looking at 32 trees. And that is how the code is currently written for 2:1. But that is the last key issue. We said a certain percentage can be removed without needing to replant, right?
Understood.
And then,
Okay, so yeah, it does seem that we should give people the option when it comes to removing a tree that has to go, that doesn't put them in the situation where they got to plant a forest to mitigate, where it talks about the eventual canopy size and not, cutting on the tree to keep it tiny, even though it wants to be big. That's what I see in real world practice happening over and over and over again is people not allowing trees to grow and flourish and turn into a mature canopy. And I think that would probably be the best practice if we're trying to maintain a percentage, is encourage people to plant trees that do grow a significant canopy and keep it healthy. If they're going to if tree removal is necessary. In some situations it is, either it's in the way of something that they want to build or whatever.
Sarah Jackson.
Micah, that's interesting information. In that scenario that you just described, would you add that to one of these 2 options, that language into one of these 2 options?
I think it would be option 2, the no net loss, where it's the verbiage is similar to the mitigation ratios and similar mature canopy spread.
Okay.
And even if it were a 2-to-1 or a 1-to-1 ratio, it's just not this unrealistic. You've got to buy, 32 trees because you took out one big one. I mean, in the regular replanting and growing and establishing greater canopy, just larger trees with larger canopies and keeping them healthy seems like it's going to accomplish that.
Okay.
Mr. Billingsley?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Mike there. I think the mitigation based on tree canopy lost is much more manageable and allows for a mix of planting of trees for one significant tree removed.
I see no other hands, Chair Jackson.
Okay, in light of discussion, does anyone else have any other comments or ideas? Okay, well, in that case, I will move for option number 2 with the language as written in the green box.
Ms. Neff?
I second that motion.
It has been moved by Chair Jackson and seconded by Ms. Neff that we move forward with option 2 on key issue 9.
Okay, if there's any other comments? If not, we will move to a vote.
Allison Billingsley, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Boatman,
Yay.
Tika Mayor Dunlop,
Yay.
John Ellers,
Yay.
Micah Glassstetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Pink Jones,
Yay.
Sean Martin. Oh, he's excused. Maya Neff
Yay.
and Denise Nicole Franklin.
Yay.
The chair, now we can move on to the city tree fund clarity. I just wanted to mention we have about 15 minutes left and we have 3 issues. We have the tree fund clarity. We have the violations and enforcement, the fines, and we have the incentives.
Okay.
So the tree fund clarity, the idea is to further strengthen or clarify them with one or more options. This should really say option 1 here. So I'll fix that. And that idea is to allow the city to use tree permit fees and penalties to go into the fund. The second option is to add as an explicit funding purpose to include restoration or enhancement of native trees like Gary Oak, such as on public lands, private tree tracts, critical area buffers, or lands with conservation easements.
Chair Jackson?
My initial question after reading this is there any reason why we couldn't do both
You can do both.
as an option 3?
Mr. Glassstetter?
Yeah, I had the same thought. Those don't seem to be mutually exclusive, and they both seem to be good ideas.
I see no other hands.
I'll move that we endorse option number 3 as it was just stated.
I second.
It has been moved by Mr. Billingsley and seconded by Mr. Boatman that for key issue number 10, we move forward with option number 3, which is all of the above.
Okay, are there any other comments before we move to a vote? Okay, if Lisa, we can move to the vote.
Okay. Ellen Billingsley, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Boatman,
Yay.
Tika Maria Dunlap,
Yay.
Jean Ellers,
Yay.
Micah Glassstetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Hank Jones,
Yay.
Maya Neff,
Yay.
Denise Nicole Franklin,
Yay.
right? Moving into fines. There's information that was shared with the committee in several meetings, including the 5th of April. We shared some ideas on how different cities address fines and enforcement. And that led to some options before you. So the options are for enforcement, establish a free or low cost tree permit or affidavit over the counter review to make compliance the easy path. Provide a clear decision criteria on tree permits. This provides certainty in decision making, including the potential for denial. 3, increase penalties for non-compliance, for example, triple penalties. Have an administrative appeal opportunity with a code-based percentage limit on reductions, and you can do any or all of these. Or add to the list.
Mr. Glassstetter,
Those all seem to be good ideas and doable options. So I do like all three.
I see no other hands. Mr. Billingsley,
Yeah, just a quick comment. I like all three also, but particularly number 3, because we have had in our city instances of non-compliance that were belligerent and intentional and just paid the fines.
no other hands.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Mr. Glassstetter,
I might be going out on a limb here, so to speak, but I think if those penalties and fines also apply to the service that agreed to perform the work without knowing that they had a permit or seeing the permit, I think that would be an additional deterrent.
So, Micah, are you saying that it has to apply to both the property owner and the tree service?
Yes. And yeah, it doesn't even have to specifically say tree service. I would say contractor, because there's a lot of people who cut a tree down that are not a tree service.
Mr. Boatman,
I really like what Mike said about that. For further clarification, I'm opening it up to just the thought that could be perceived as the contractor and the homeowner or the property owner would share the fine. I think it's important to note that is the intent to have an equal fine levied against both those parties and not just to have a sharing of the cost. So just food for thought there.
Mr. Glassstetter,
I say make it individual. If you got a murderer and an accomplice, they both go to jail for the same amount of time.
I see no other hands.
Okay, well, based on the discussion, I am going to move that we recommend all three with the, and the number 3 with the changes made as written.
Ms. Neff,
I second that motion.
It has been moved by Chair Jackson and seconded by Ms. Neff that for item number 11, key issue number 11, we move forward with all three options, option 3 as amended.
Chair, do you want to go ahead?
And yes, we're ready for a vote unless there's other comments.
Ellen Billingsley, yea or nay?
Yay.
John Boatman,
Yay.
Tigomir Dunlop,
Yay.
Jean Ellers,
Yay.
Micah Glassstetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Hank Jones,
Yay.
Maya Neff,
Yay.
Denise Nicole Franklin.
Yay.
Thank you. Okay, our last item written in the report is related to incentives. Over several meetings, we provided some information on how different cities apply incentives to avoid trees and help retain them. We identified some places in the Lakewood Code where such types of incentives could apply, whether it was about density or setbacks or height in housing or commercial or industrial areas, parking, district-wide standards in downtown and in the station district, and then generally across the city, stormwater management. So summarizing that into options, you can do any or all of these. The options are to, this should say allow, allow for variable setback, building setbacks, parking ratios or design standards, landscaping width, and on-site open space standards for Gary Oak preservation. So that's the Oak Harbor idea, where you can get different standards in order to help preserve Gary Oak. You could provide a bonus density for greater significant tree protection. That would be any kind of significant tree based on a graduated scale of preservation. So more density for greater preservation. Provide bonus height if more significant trees are preserved. Based on a graduated scale of preservation. Offer municipal stormwater credit programs, have a discount on land use permit fees for tree preservation, and develop a Tree City USA program.
Mr. Glassstetter?
I do like all those options. However, I think they're all, the verbiage in all of them is protection, preservation, or in other words, just not cutting them down. But I would like to see incentives for planting large canopy trees, Gary Oaks, when it comes to developing any type of property or any change of use trigger. Anytime anybody is required to put in landscaping is to incentivize planting large canopy trees and allowing them to grow to their full dimension. And Gary Oaks as well. I'm watching it being printed out, but I mean, we look at even town center, most of those trees, they're just allowing them to reach their full height. And I've said this before, but every time you go into a parking lot on a hot day, all the cars are crowded around the trees. You know, people love the trees, and they're making a huge difference on these, you know, asphalt deserts that we have everywhere. So incentivize planting more of them.
Chair Jackson?
I absolutely agree with Micah on that topic. I also wonder, and Michael, you'll have to see if you agree with this or not, but should we incentivize the planting of native trees? In other words, trees that we know will do well in this area, as opposed to a tree that you might plant in California or something.
Well, what I would say to that is there does have to be some allowance for creativity, because as we've talked about, Gary oaks don't get very big very fast. About the only native that I'm aware of that grows a large canopy fast and does well in this climate is big leaf maples. I put a couple in my house, and there's only had either one of them in the ground for about 4 years. And I'm looking at a tree that's taller than my house now and provides shade for 2 patios between these 2 trees. So those are kind of your options, unless I'm missing something, because no one's going to plant Doug firs in a parking lot, or anything that's built to compete, like a cottonwood or something like that. But yeah, encourage native trees for sure. But we got to remember, a vine maple is a native tree, and it doesn't like to be out in the open, and I see a lot of them planted on commercial properties and apartment buildings because it's a native, but it's not doing anything for our tree canopy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ms. Ellers, followed by Ms. Neff.
I would suggest that the vine maples are planted mixed in, because that's where they just sparkle for us in the fall when they are coming forth with their beautiful variety in colors for them. So vine maple, I think they're great, and I'm really happy that your large leaf maple is doing well. And I do believe that native trees should grow and do well in the area. The Gary oak is nice, and it's a lovely tree, and it will do wonders for us. But I think the trees, as I've indicated from the onset, the trees need to be respected, and those trees that do well in certain areas, they should be planted in that area and somehow be part of a preservation, so that they're in fact going to be given the respect and not chopped down the first wind blows and a branch falls. Thank you.
Ms. Neff, followed by Chair Jackson.
Yeah, I was going to say that the natives is kind of a mixed bag in terms of canopy size, as you pointed out. Oregon, or the Gary oak, big leaf maple, they're going to get you your biggest canopy size. But you also have to keep in mind, particularly for commercial plantings, very few of our native trees really like hot asphalt on them. It reflected heat, most of the native trees we're not really happy with, unless you do go down into California. So native trees were appropriate, or encouraging native, but caveat that there's going to definitely be situations where like a crepe myrtle is going to do way better than a Gary oak.
Yeah.
Chair Jackson, followed by Mr. Dunlop. Chair Jackson, you're muted.
Maybe we could put a statement in the end saying something along the lines of utilize native trees where appropriate.
Yeah. Yes.
And then people can, if it's appropriate, then plant a native.
Yeah.
Mr. Dunlop.
I just wanted to say real quick regarding native trees, and I think since trees are something that are going to be around a long time, one has to look into the future. And with climate change, there are a lot of trees that are native that aren't necessarily going to be able to do well. Not including Gary oaks, but like for example, like a lot of the cedar trees around here have not been doing well in the hotter summers. So in some situations, especially like as was being said with asphalt, there are probably non-native trees that, looking into the future, might be more appropriate in some situations, because with climate change, we don't know exactly how much warmer it's going to get, but assuming it's going to get hotter, native trees, if you plant them now, it might be okay, but in the future, they might not be doing so well.
Mr. Billingsley.
I think most of us are in agreement that all of these are good ideas. I would like to just add one other comment, that we are sending this to professionals. And so I would like to leave a wild card in there that other incentives as they find or dream up in the future are also possible. There's things we haven't thought of, and things will be included as we study other cities and what they've done too. I think the incentives are really a good motivation to accomplish our goals.
Would the way I've written number 8 work for you? Other incentives that reflect best practices?
Perfect has to do.
Mr. Dunlop, did you have another comment? I see no other hands.
Well, based on all of the feedback that we've just received, I am going to move that we accept incentives 1 through 8 as written.
I would like to second that.
It's been moved by Chair Jackson and seconded by Ms. Franklin that we move forward with adopting all 8 as written options under key issue 12.
And if there's no other comments, Lisa, we can move to a vote.
Okay. Alan Billingsley, yea or nay?
Yay.
John Boatman,
Yay.
Tico Mir Dunlop,
Yay.
Jean Ellers,
Yay.
Micah Glassstetter,
Yay.
Melissa Jackson,
Yay.
Hank Jones,
Yay.
Maya Neff,
Yay.
Denise Nicole Franklin.
Yay.
Okay, Chair, that is, I believe, all the items in the packet.
Okay. If everyone doesn't mind staying on for about 5 more minutes, thank you so much. So glad that we were able to get through all of them. Lisa, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what our next steps are.
Sure. And Courtney can join me in that. So I think then sort of logistically, we will work on minutes of the Tuesday meeting and the Thursday meeting. Those will be emailed to you for any corrections, and presuming that you vote by email that they are appropriate, then those would be considered approved. We will be preparing the report. So wherever you saw the ad hoc committee consensus vote TBD, we're going to fill in everything that you've done over your last 3 meetings to reflect your votes. And that report will be transmitted to the Planning Commission and City Council. That report is the basis for developing red lines to the current code based on your recommendations. Courtney, do you want to share any more on the next steps in the schedule?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So starting May 4th, we will start the review of the tree code before the Planning Commission. We are scheduled to meet with the Planning Commission. Likely, I'm anticipating at least 4 times between May and June. There will be a public hearing before the Planning Commission. We have not set that date yet. I think it's likely to be held in June, either at their first or second meeting. Once the Planning Commission finalizes recommendations to the City Council, and what that will look like is an actual redlined version of the code that they are recommending to move forward to the City Council, the City Council will begin their review. And that will include all of the work you have done, all of the work the Planning Commission does, and hopefully a redlined version of the code that is clean and succinct for them to start to review and provide comments on. They will then also hold a public hearing, and this will be taking place in July and August. We will make sure that you are up to date with those public hearing dates when they go out. We encourage you all to continue to participate in that way, whether it be in written comments or attending the hearings in person. Both Planning Commission and City Council are currently meeting in person, and their meetings are Mondays and Wednesdays. So our goal date, and you all managed to pull it off, was for us to start with Planning Commission in May. We are on schedule to hopefully have a revised tree code adopted in August. Typically, code amendments are in effect 30 days after adoption. So we'd be looking at all of this hard work being put into practice in September, which is a very quick turnaround. I do want to just take a really quick minute to thank each of you so much for all of your time and commitment to serving on this committee. This was a huge haul. We reviewed a lot of information over about 11 hours together, which is a significant amount of time in 2 months. So thank you for your time and your commitment on behalf of all of the city. And I'm sure that you will receive other recognition from the Planning Commission and from the City Council, but for what it's worth, from me and from Lisa, we really appreciate it and appreciate all of your engagement and dialogue and discussion as we've moved forward through these difficult topics. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa and Courtney, and appreciate all of you and look forward to maybe meeting you all in person someday. And I think with that, we'll adjourn today's meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.